and I'm easily distracted. Oops,
I was
something's
just going to
shining
say
over
that for
there.
you. Yeah,
Oops, something's shining over there. Oh,
squirrel.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Firepit Chat with Ben and Joe. I'm Joe. Hey, Ben, how are you?
Doing well, Joe. How are you?
Oh, great. Great to be here. Great to be with you on the phone today and
Yep.
having another chat by the fire pit.
Looking forward to it.
All right, so we'll jump right into this. There was a reading by Oswald Chambers. It really, really spoke to me this morning, and I wanted to share it with you, and let's just talk about it a little bit. So I'll read it. It's from Oswald Chambers from today, January 22nd. The greatest difficulty spiritually is to concentrate on God, and His blessings are what make it so difficult. Troubles always make us look to God, but His blessings tend to divert our attention elsewhere. And so that's part of a bigger post. But when I read that, I was like, that makes sense. I'm in this foxhole. I'm in this place.
Yeah.
I'm begging for something.
Yeah.
And as soon as I get it, it's like, all right, back to life.
Yes. Yep. This is one of those places where I think it's very easy to kind of veer off into a danger in either direction, because I don't think you can hear what Oswald Chambers says there and not see the point, because you don't even need to go as far as thinking about your relationship with God to see that. I mean,
Right.
I've been surprised as a parent about how it can be that sometimes when I am most generous with my children and trying to pour the most into their life, for their well-being, it doesn't automatically produce gratitude. It doesn't automatically produce intimacy. There can be a taking things for granted, and that's certainly real. I also get a little bit nervous, though, on the other side of the road, because I think there's a danger there too, that we could begin to think that somehow the way to have the most of God is to have the least of His gifts, almost as if it's kind of a zero-sum game where the more God, the less gifts, the more gifts, the less God. That does not need to be the case. It doesn't need to even be the case. I mean, it is not objectively the case, but even within our own hearts, that doesn't need to. God and His gifts don't need to be sort of rivals. Because,
Right.
and again, being a parent has helped me with this, because I know that when I somebody once said this and it helped me, when I give my kids a gift, I am not actually wanting them to just throw the gift aside and say, oh, Dad, your gifts don't matter. It's you I want. Because it's actually the gift itself. That's the way by which I'm loving them. And in seeing them enjoy that gift, my love is sort of accomplishing what it wanted to accomplish, which was their joy and their blessing. And I don't think we should think about God as looking down from heaven and, sort of tapping His foot, if I can put it that way, when we're enjoying His gifts. I mean, He's given them for enjoyment. And in fact, in truly enjoying them, you could make the case we're truly enjoying the giver. But, so easily in gratitude or just a real independence, or even, to use the Bible word, idolatry, where in a very real way, this gift is now center of my hope, my desire, my devotion, it's kind of what I'm looking to sustain me and secure me and give me flourishing. And it can become sort of a little God almost. Those are very real dangers too. So, I mean, I realize I'm kind of just dumping stuff on the table here, but yeah, there's a lot going on in that quote.
Well, in the positive side of what you shared, it sounds like the merging of the material with the spiritual, right? So
Yeah.
I'm not giving you $5 to manipulate you, or I'm not buying you this gift.
Right.
I've had the spiritual connection that maybe manifested itself, and wow, this gift to this person would be nice for them. They would enjoy this.
Mm-hmm.
Is that maybe what you're saying too? So in that when we look at our children or other relationships, if I merge the spiritual, then the material can be a tool as opposed to material first, which ignores the spiritual.
That's a great way of putting it. So that, right. Or maybe another way of saying that would be the material is always in the context of the relational. It's two hearts being joined, and gift giving is one way that can happen. But of course, gift giving, the gift can also just be sort of snatched and we can run off with it, and it actually is not building the relationship. The way that we respond to a gift can be as manipulative as the way we give a gift. So there's just a lot there. But I think what you're putting your finger on is those relational dynamics. That's the thing. That's where the object suddenly becomes as a tool of love, an instrument through which I'm experiencing care and giving care. I think that's the point. Am I reading you right? What you've just
Yeah.
said?
Yeah, and I think what you said as an object is good because it's not actual love itself. It's an
Yes.
object of love of the
Yes.
my heart, and
Yes.
it's manifesting itself in that gift. But
Exactly.
the gift itself doesn't mean I love you. It just means that
That's
the
right.
gift doesn't have the power.
Right.
The power is in my heart, and it's manifesting it in this way. It could also be, if I rub my wife's back, or
Right.
scratch her back,
Right.
that could be love too.
Right.
But so the gift itself isn't love or represent love. If I give her, and to your point even earlier when we were talking, was if I give her a gold bracelet or I rub her back, it doesn't mean I love her more because I gave her a gold bracelet and less because I
Exactly.
rubbed her back.
Well, exactly. There's an ancient proverb in the book of Proverbs that says, "Better a dinner of herbs where love is than a fatted calf with strife."
Right. Right.
You don't improve relationships by just pouring more material into them, So yeah, and I think we have to just remember that with God, that the point is that He loves us. He's generous. His heart towards us is kind, and His gift should be received that way. And then when they are received that way, then I don't think you can ever enjoy a gift too much, because you can't enjoy God's love too much.
And it should be right sized as well, because this
Yes.
gift, because again, I didn't give you the gold bracelet because I love you more than if I rubbed your back. So it right sizes the gift and puts it in perspective, and
Yep.
maybe may take out some of this pressure that I have to buy a gold bracelet, otherwise the other person won't feel loved.
I think that's where a lot of great stories, even sort of fairy tale stories for children, have focused on that idea that sometimes, to use another story from the Gospels, sometimes the widow giving her 2 cents means more in the eyes of God than the Pharisee pouring in the overflow of his wealth. It's sometimes you can make the case that in this right sizing, there's more love in the little gift, the fragile, unimpressive gift. There's more love going on there than in,
Right.
hedge fund trust babies, kind of a situation. So yeah.
I find it interesting too, and because I've been reading Oswald Chambers quite a bit lately, and he doesn't waste one word.
Mm. Yeah, it's
Every
true.
every word is intentional, I believe.
Yeah.
So he describes as the greatest difficulty spiritually is to concentrate on God.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because I'm probably sounding like I'm almost being a bit negative about what the point Chambers is making, and so I'm glad you're bringing us back to that side of the road, because that's true. That's true. That's the challenge. It's not that you have to go throw away all the gifts, but that you just put your finger on, that he's putting his finger on, is the thing. Are you? We were chatting before the show. Are you awake to what's really going on here? So awake to it that if God took away the gift, you're still well. You're still at peace. Gosh, that's
Right.
hard.
Yeah. Well, that's why I guess why again he says the
Yeah.
greatest difficulty spiritually is that it's the concentrate. I like when I read things to look at the verbs, and that verb is concentrate, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily adore, even though it may
Mm-hmm.
mean that, or
Mm-hmm.
or be humble, even though it may mean that, and it probably encompasses all of that.
Yeah.
But he purposely uses concentrate, which I think to me is a very specific meaning. When I concentrate, it's very focused,
Yes.
and
Yes.
it blocks out other things. I'm concentrating. Give me some room. I'm concentrating here.
Right. Right. Yeah. The other word I've heard used that I think is pretty similar is attentiveness. And I actually did some reading about this a while back that was pretty illuminating. And forgive me if this sounds a little eggheadish, but the Latin word that underlies attentiveness is attendere, and it's a physical sort of word. It just means to reach toward. And I think concentrate has that same idea of centering on something, kind of reaching for it in a very intentional way, almost as if nothing else exists. And what's interesting is there is something that you're only going to see if you're that attentive, if you're that concentrated. There are things that demand concentration, because if you're not zeroed in, I mean, really laser like focused, there's a lot you're going to miss. And maybe that's part of what he's getting at with that word, is that you're going to miss a lot of God and what he's doing if you're not kind of fully awake to some things. Is that fair? I mean,
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think I love the word, and I love what you're saying, because specifically, with my wife, with you and I right now, there's feedback, there's give and take that I can process verbally, auditorily, that doesn't exist when I concentrate on God necessarily. So I do need to shut it out to really open up all those channels to hear or to feel or to
yes.
intuit from God what do you want me to do?
Yes. And there is, and maybe this is also part of what he's getting at, there is a sense in which the sensory world can be a bit distracting. I mean, there's a reason, this is not any kind of religious law, but there is a reason why people tend to close their eyes when they pray. Jesus said, go into your closet. I mean, you can pray on the street, but our five senses are very awake to all things material, and there is a lot of value in a separation from the sensory. This is why people engage in fasting sometimes, because just even the fact that my appetite is so dialed into food, sometimes silencing that for a while sharpens my senses. I have to somewhat descend within. I want to be careful here, but you have to sort of descend within yourself into a kind of stillness. Although here again, I always feel like we need to be careful of the other ditch, because it's also true that God has made the world to be a place where his glory is shining. And if you cut yourself off from the world, you've cut yourself off from those ways in which he's showing his glory to you. So, I mean, it's not an anti-material, anti-sensory thing, but I think I'll just say this.
I think the word you said, distraction, I think at the base of it is, and I'm easily distracted. Oops, something's shining over there.
Yeah.
Oops, something's shining over there. Oops,
squirrel. I know.
Right?
I'm with you, man.
So I think that, and yes, I think the opposite pole, right? So the pendulum swings both ways. To your point is to, for me to be sitting in the dark, and never moving or radiating out God's love.
Right, because that can become almost its own kind of selfishness too. I mean, I've had some embarrassing moments, I got to tell you, where I've had a moment of prayer, kind of, closeting myself with God, and I'm feeling pretty juiced spiritually. And then all of a sudden I walk out of the closet and I walk into some family situation or some other thing, and it just feels like the glory evaporates like
real quick.
Yeah, it's embarrassing.
Absolutely. And I think that's all part of it, right? So the positive and negative poles of things, or even just the poles, the opposite poles. And in those moments, there's a lot of growth and there's a lot of joy. And then, life is in that pendulum back and forth.
Right. That's right.
So I think concentrate is really important. The second sentence, troubles almost always make us look to God. And so when I think about that, and I don't know if I'm embarrassed to share this, but I'm going to share it. What the heck? We're two guys. I think that at times, because I've for many, many years used foxhole type prayers, like when only there's a trouble, I suddenly became deeply, especially when I was much younger, that sometimes I got to this place when troubles came, I felt like I couldn't look to God, and I wouldn't look to God.
Yes.
And so I thought that was, sometimes I always go there, and then when I become aware that I always go there, there was this transitional piece, and I think it comes from the concentration piece to let me know I can always go to God. I mean, eventually, hopefully, this knowing starts to go in me, and these spiritual muscles start to flex, and I become better and better at it. And I think I have. But there were definitely times where I said, I can't take this to God. He doesn't want to hear me again.
Yeah. No, I mean, I love that, because I think it's just so very real. There can be a kind of shame, and maybe to an extent, it's kind of a good reminder that, man, I've kind of been forgetting God again. And here I am back in this hard place. He's allowed another hard thing, and I'm awake to him again. And I ought to be more awake the rest of the time. I don't think that that's necessarily a bad lesson to draw. But just what you're saying, it should certainly not keep us from crying out to God in trouble, because actually the Bible commands it. I forget which psalm it is, but call upon me in the day of trouble. That's actually a command. God wants to hear the cries of his people in trouble. He's not, in other words, if his purpose in sending the trouble was to wake you up to him, then he's not offended that it wakes you up to him.
Right.
Like what else? Like what else are you going to do? Like, okay, I'm not going to go to God with this because I'm embarrassed. So where exactly am I going to go? Right? I mean,
Right. No, I'm listening. I'm agreeing. Absolutely. Yeah. If I concentrate, then when I have those troubles, I know where to take them.
that's yes, yes, and that's also true of the blessings.
Yeah.
So I think that you could say, I know I'm keep using Bible verses, but when the Apostle Paul says, "I can be content in every situation, whether I'm abounding or being abased," I can do all, and he uses that phrase that we often hear, and it's actually misused a lot. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. He's not saying I'm like Superman. He's saying I can be in any situation through Christ, because in concentrating upon God, there's just this baseline of I always know where to go. I always know where to look. If I'm being blessed, I go to God with gratitude. If I'm being crushed, I go to God with my supplications and anguish and whatever. It's all leading me to Him.
Yeah. What you said, what it sparked in me was I remember this probably might have been when I lost my job or was about to lose my job about 3 years ago. I remember I was going to speak to somebody and say, "Oh, I have some bad news." And then another time I had some good news. And I thought about this bad news and good news, and I was meditating on that this morning. And what I got at that time is there really isn't any good news or bad news. I believe in God's world, there's just news, or there's not good times or bad times. There's just times. And if I put good or bad in front of it, which is human nature, then in a sense, I'm trying to assert my own will. So I've determined
Yeah.
this is good, so I'm going to call it good news, and I've determined this is bad, so I'm going to
Yeah.
call this bad news or good times or bad times. Certainly in the world, people
Yeah.
might be saying these are bad times, and
Yeah.
I think in God's mind they're times.
Yes.
And so it's another subtle way where I'm asserting my will over God's.
Yeah.
And so I may do that with his blessings. I may say, "Oh, that's a good blessing.
Yeah.
I like that one," or "This is a bad blessing." But to God, it's a blessing. And man, that's hard to get to that place. I may sound like I have it down, but I don't. I
Oh
don't.
man. No, that's profound. I mean, clearly, from a merely human standpoint, we 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 have the capacity to make certain judgments that certain things seem to favor our well-being, and certain things seem to be against our well-being. And I don't think in itself those judgments are wrong. But as you're pointing out, they're always very, very provisional, very tentative, very finite. We just do not see we just don't see anything even close to the big picture. And I think I think I do want to be a little bit stronger based on what you just said. We also know that everything that is happening is from the hand of God, and therefore it just is what it is in His hand. Whether it is for good or ill is really His call. And I think, yeah, I'm just sort of meditating out loud in response to what you said. I mean, I just think that is a radical shift, really, in our sense of who's running things here.
Right.
It is another form of concentration on the fact that God is God, which means He is the one who is ordering and arranging all things, and I'm within that somewhere. I don't even know necessarily quite how I fit into it all the time, but I'm in the thing He's doing, not the other way around.
Yeah. And I think for me, it's a subtle way for me from that concentration, to your point, to see when am I, even in prayer, when I'm on my knees, it's trying to assert my will.
Yeah.
you know
Yeah.
and that is just not what I'm taught.
Yeah.
But so it's that from that concentration, now I see something that when I'm asking for something, if I'm not putting hashtag if it's your will, then it's a really subtle way that I'm asserting my will, which is not aligned with His will. It's kind of circular there, but
No, yeah. I'm with you. I know we've talked before about why that, for me, prayer is kind of challenging, because I feel like I'm always walking that extremely fine line. It's not wrong to ask God for things, but man, when I show up with my list of basically instructions on how God ought to put things back together, again, it's not wrong to say, "Father, this is what seems best to me. I desire this." I mean, I think we can be almost too generic and bland in our prayers. It's important to be able to say, "This would be my will, but."
Yeah, so I think as long as I holding close to me that this is what I want, if it's your will.
Mm-hmm. Precisely.
as opposed to this is what I want, you better go do it.
Right. Or yes, or some sort of religious version of, if you loved me, this is how things will
Right.
shake out. Yeah.
And that's tough to do. I think that's, again, going back to why he says the greatest difficulty spiritually.
Yes.
Because these things are not easy to do, and they take concentration,
Yep.
which encompasses all these other actions,
Yep.
perspectives, and thoughts. That's why I think concentrate is probably a really good word.
Yeah, because it establishes the center, and how we work out from that center is maybe the kind of the business of walking with God, and it is. But you always kind of know what you're getting back to fundamentally, which is, I've been decentered, and God, I'm orbiting Him. What does that mean?
Yeah. So, I mean, it was 2 sentences from Oswald Chambers, but we got 20 minutes. We probably could do 40 minutes or more on it. But
I love him. I love him as a writer that way, because, as you said, he just is he's so pithy. It's fun to unpack because it's just so dense.
Yeah. Yes. And I'm pretty dense myself, so I definitely need to unpack it.
I'm with you, man. Great stuff.
All right. So, hey, Ben, thanks. This was a great time here. We got to look a little bit here at Oswald Chambers today. All right. Well, everybody, thanks for listening and sticking with us through our episode. We appreciate your time, and look forward to sharing this space with you again. Thanks, Ben. Have a great week.
You too, man.